Welcome to First Sleep Aid, calm stories to help you unwind, learn, and fall asleep. From true crime to curious facts and thoughtful ideas, always softly spoken. Subscribe now and take a deep breath. You're in good hands. Welcome. Today we're diving into a really powerful story from a very dark time in history. It's about a young woman's incredible stand against tyranny.
Yes, we'll be looking at courage, loss, and the kind of hope that still resonates from her actions.
We're talking about Germany, of course, during the rise and reign of the
A
Nazis.
time when, thinking for yourself, basic freedoms, they were being systematically crushed. It's hard to overstate the atmosphere.
Absolutely. And in that kind of climate, one person choosing to follow their conscience, well, it's extraordinary.
Truly significant.
Our focus is Sophie Scholl, specifically her early life, how her conscience was formed. She was born in 1921 in Württemberg.
And her family background seems crucial here. Her father, Robert Scholl, he was a liberal politician, believed strongly in democratic ideals.
Right. And her mother, Magdalena, brought a sense of compassion and faith into the home.
It sounds like the kind of household where asking questions was actually encouraged. Thinking for yourself, finding your own moral compass.
That seems key, even when your own beliefs might go against what everyone else is saying.
That foundation of independent thought, it clearly became vital later on.
Even as a child, Sophie seems to have had this vibrant spirit. Loved art, nature, books.
And she was close to her siblings, wasn't she? Especially Hans.
Yes, very close. And it's important to remember, like a lot of young Germans then, she was initially, well, drawn to the Nazi party. She joined the Bund Deutscher Mädel.
Which really highlights how pervasive that ideology was, its appeal, particularly to young people looking for belonging, for purpose.
Definitely. But her father warned her, didn't he, about sort of blindly following.
Yeah, those warnings seem to have planted some early seeds of doubt, maybe made her question things even then.
And that initial enthusiasm started to fade. She saw firsthand how individuality was suppressed, how Jewish neighbors were treated.
And the family themselves came under scrutiny. Her father was even imprisoned for a time.
That's right. Which must have really brought the danger home. But she kept seeking out other perspectives, reading forbidden books, these quiet little acts of defiance.
Even during her labor service as a nursery teacher, she apparently resisted the indoctrination in subtle ways, prioritizing kindness, not enforcing the harshest rules.
It shows her internal compass was already quite strong, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It seems like a deepening commitment to her own sense of right and wrong.
So all these experiences, her upbringing, what she witnessed, her reading, they led her to the University of Munich in 1942.
And by then, that foundation seemed solid. A love for truth, a sense of personal responsibility, and a real faith in individual conscience.
Munich in 42, I mean, that's the heart of the Nazi regime. Swastikas everywhere, displays of power.
Exactly. And for Sophie, those symbols, which maybe once held some appeal, now just felt wrong, unsettling.
But university life, ironically perhaps, offered a bit of space, a place for questioning, for thinking.
She found others there, professors, students, who shared some of her doubts, her unease.
And she reconnected with her brother Hans there, who was also studying.
Right, and he was on a similar path, wasn't he? Disillusioned.
Yeah, he introduced her to his circle of friends, Alexander Schmarel, Willy Graf, Christoph Probst.
Ah, the group that would become central. People who shared this kind of intellectual, spiritual resistance.
They had these late-night discussions, philosophy, literature, theology, politics.
Which in itself was a form of defiance, right? In a society demanding total conformity, just talking about those things freely.
And Sophie's transformation, it seems gradual but profound, seeing dissent punished, the persecution escalating.
And she was troubled by the passivity, wasn't she? The way so many people just seemed to go along with it.
Her father's words must have echoed, "Stand up for what you believe, even if you stand alone."
That must have resonated so deeply. Imagine feeling that isolated from most other students who were buying into the propaganda.
You can feel her yearning for action, this growing belief that maybe, just maybe, truth could awaken people's consciences.
And that's when she discovered what Hans and his friends were doing. The leaflets.
Yes, the anonymous leaflets, the white rose. And she didn't just approve, she demanded to join. Instantly.
Which took immense courage. Joining the White Rose, distributing anti-Nazi material, the risk was enormous. Death penalty stuff.
Absolutely. But they felt they had to act. Their method was simple, almost crude, a hand-cranked duplicating machine.
Printing these leaflets and then leaving them in public places, a
Yeah.
direct challenge.
And the message was clear, calling out the lies, the atrocities, appealing directly to the German conscience.
Sophie didn't see it as heroism, did she? More like a duty.
A moral obligation, yeah. But the danger was very real and growing. Gestapo surveillance was increasing.
And the White Rose was expanding its reach, trying to connect with people in other cities.
Sophie knew they might fail, of course, but she seemed to believe the cost of silence was even greater.
That's a powerful conviction. She apparently reflected on those who just chose to survive, rather than stand up.
Her defiance wasn't about hate, was it? It seems rooted in love for truth, justice, human dignity.
So the White Rose starts with these secret conversations in Munich, driven by this core belief. Silence is complicity.
Right. And their weapon, their strategy, was information. Leaflets to wake people up.
And the key members brought different strengths. Hans understood the Nazi mindset, the indoctrination.
Alexander Schmorl, more of an international humanist view. Christoph Probst, maybe more emotional depth.
And Sophie.
Hmm.
Her resolve, her clarity, her role in expanding their vision seems crucial.
Especially as a young woman taking such an active, dangerous role in that society. It was radical.
Definitely. Those first leaflets in summer 42, they pulled no punches, called out Hitler's lies, told people they deserved the government they tolerated,
Calling themselves the bad conscience of Germany. Very direct.
and citing specific atrocities, making it impossible to ignore. The risk in just handling those leaflets, let alone distributing them, was immense.
You can understand why the Gestapo were desperate to find the source.
Even when Hans and Alexander were sent to the Eastern Front, they kept going, right? Distributing leaflets, even there.
Incredible commitment. And back home, Sophie was trying to recruit to reach other universities.
Then comes the fifth leaflet, early 43. The tone shifts, becomes even more urgent.
Yeah, calling for sabotage, overthrow, ending with freedom and honor. It's a real escalation.
They must have known the danger was closing in. The possibility of death was becoming very real.
And that leads to the plan for the big leaflet drop at the university in February 43. Driven partly by news from Stalingrad, maybe a sense the tide was turning.
Possibly. They prepared thousands of copies of a new leaflet, meticulously planned.
And then that morning, February 18th, Hans and Sophie walk into the university, suitcases full of paper.
They start distributing them calmly, methodically. Hallways, outside lecture rooms.
And then Sophie makes that decision, the impulsive act, throwing the rest off the balcony.
A symbolic gesture, perhaps.
Yeah.
Wanting the message to literally fly free, reach everyone.
Maybe. But it was seen. The janitor, Jacob Schmid, he reported them.
And that was it. Arrested by noon. University officials, then the Gestapo.
But the idea, the spirit of the White Rose, that couldn't be arrested, could it? It had already taken root.
Those leaflets, they weren't just paper, were they? They were condensed defiance. Conscience made visible.
Drawing on Germany's own philosophical traditions, ironically. Reminding people of values the regime had trampled.
And exposing the truth about the atrocities, things the regime tried so hard to hide.
They weren't calling for violence, though. It was about waking people up, right? Passive resistance, taking back moral responsibility.
Asking those incredibly direct questions like, why do you allow yourselves to be misled? Hitting right at the core of people's complicity.
It's hard to know the immediate impact, how many minds they changed right then.
True, but the Gestapo's reaction tells you something. They saw these leaflets as a serious threat.
Sophie seemed to have this absolute faith in truth, that it would endure no matter what.
She understood how propaganda worked, how it twisted language. So she chose clarity, directness, unvarnished truth.
Like her comment during interrogation that others believed as they did, but just lacked the courage. That really cuts deep.
Yeah. The leaflets connected personal suffering, which many felt, to the bigger moral disaster.
They were a call to think for yourself, in a system that demanded absolute obedience, a reminder of Germany's own history of critical thought, of human dignity.
They seemed to know their words might outlast them. There's almost a prophetic quality speaking to a future reckoning.
Believing truth survives, even if the truth-tellers don't.
That image of the leaflets falling, like snowflakes of conscience you said earlier, it's very powerful.
Even as the Gestapo closed in, their spirit seemed to get stronger, didn't it?
Theirs was a revolution of words against power, truth against terror, conscience against cruelty.
February 18th, 1943. A cold, gray morning in Munich. War-torn city.
And Hans and Sophie walk into the university, carrying those suitcases. It's hard to imagine the resolve.
Distributing the leaflets calmly, methodically. Almost routine, but loaded with danger.
And then Sophie's act with the remaining leaflets from the balcony. That final, visible flourish.
Seen by the janitor, reported immediately, the system reacting instantly.
Apprehended right there, handed over to the Gestapo, separated, interrogated, accused of high treason.
Hans tried to shield her at first, didn't he? Tried to take all the responsibility.
He did. But Sophie wouldn't have it. She admitted everything, asserted her own moral responsibility. No hiding.
Reports say she was incredibly composed during the interrogation, almost serene. It baffled her interrogators.
That quiet moral authority she seemed to possess, and her directness when asked about the danger, saying, "You know the war is lost. Why are you so cowardly you won't admit it?"
Just stunning courage. Utterly fearless.
But then they found the draft leaflet on Hans, the one implicating Christoph Probst.
Right. And he was arrested too. The net closed completely.
Sophie's last days in a Gestapo cell, under constant watch.
But even there, small acts of resistance. Maintaining dignity, refusing despair, apparently comforting others.
And that brief visit from her parents. Robert and Magdalena. Imagine that meeting.
Heartbreaking, her father telling her she'd made history, how proud he was.
She knew what was coming, though. No illusions about the trial, Roland Freisler. It wouldn't be justice.
No, it was going to be a show trial, a predetermined outcome.
So she prepared herself for one last act, to bear witness,
Yeah.
to speak truth one final time. Her spirit completely unbowed.
The People's Court, presided over by Roland Freisler. It wasn't a court of law, it was a stage for terror. Predetermined verdict.
Exactly. And the trial for Sophie, Hans, and Christoph on February 22nd was swift, brutal. Freisler shouting, berating them.
But Sophie, she remained calm through it all, unshaken.
Completely. No recanting, no begging. Her answers were precise, unwavering, took full responsibility, stood by everything.
And that famous line when Freisler accused her of corrupting German youth, somebody had to make a start.
Just incredible. It silenced the court, apparently. Even her captors were reportedly amazed by her courage.
The trial was over in less than a day.
Guilty, of course. High treason. Sentence. Death by guillotine. To be carried out that same afternoon.
And she accepted it, with grace. No tears, no pleas.
Her last hours spent with Hans and Christoph, talking about hope, even then.
She wrote a final message, didn't she, noting the fine, sunny day, believing her death might awaken others.
So moving. Then, being led to the execution chamber, walking tall, refusing a blindfold, facing it head on.
Witnesses described her serenity, her final words. Die Sonne scheint noch. The sun still shines.
A profound statement of hope against overwhelming darkness.
Hans and Christoph followed soon after, Hans shouting, "Long live freedom."
The regime thought they'd silence them, but they amplified their voices, didn't they? Created martyrs.
Their story started to spread almost immediately. Foreign broadcasts picked it up. Their names became symbols.
Symbols of moral resistance. Sophie's stand in that courtroom, a beacon of integrity, proving freedom is worth dying for.
That spirit couldn't be executed.
Sophie's final hours. There's this sense of extraordinary grace about them, returning to her cell, carrying this stillness.
And small kindnesses. A guard giving her paper and pen, allowing her parents that final visit.
Yes, moments of humanity in the midst of it all. That reunion with Robert and Magdalena must have been almost unbearable, but so important.
Her affirming her actions, saying she had no regrets, giving them that, at least.
Her mother praying. Their conversation about love, hope, the strength of those family bonds.
And her final letters filled with love, urging her family to be strong.
Then those last minutes. Silent prayer, reflection, finding that inner fortitude.
Until the executioners arrived, her calm walk, refusing the blindfold, unflinching.
Witnesses spoke of her almost seeming radiant, and then those final words again.
Die Sonne scheint noch.
Followed by Hans's cry, "Es lebe die Freiheit, long live freedom."
And Christoph's quieter acceptance, finding peace in his faith. Different paths to the same end, united by conviction.
The white rose was cut down, physically destroyed. But the idea, the spirit that immediately began to rise, the Gestapo completely miscalculated.
They created martyrs whose story would echo far beyond Germany, far beyond that time, a symbol of resistance, of the human yearning for freedom.
And Sophie's final affirmation of hope, that the sun still shines. It just resonates so powerfully, even now.
So in the immediate aftermath, it might have looked like the Gestapo one. The white rose seemed crushed.
But that sixth leaflet, their final message, it survived. somehow.
Which is amazing in itself. Smuggled out of Germany, eventually reaching the Allies.
And then, July 1943, the RAF dropping copies of that very leaflet over Germany. Imagine that.
Their words, once whispered in secret, now literally falling from the sky, an incredible turning of the tables.
It must have been a powerful moment. And after the war, as Germany confronted its past, the white rose became this crucial symbol.
A symbol of moral courage, proof that not everyone went along, that resistance, even if small, had existed.
Which led to the memorials, the squares named after them, the schools, the atrium at the university becoming a place of remembrance.
Their story told in books, films, plays, spreading globally.
But the real legacy, perhaps, is quieter. It's in the daily choices people make. To speak truth, to stand against injustice, however small.
Sophie's voice echoing, her courage reminding us that ordinary people, through their principles, shape history.
You can definitely see the White Rose's influence on post-war German values. Democracy, human rights, the importance of conscience.
Sophie Scholl really stands among the great moral figures of the century, and the questions she faced. They don't go away, do they? Living under tyranny, individual responsibility.
Her life is like a map, maybe. Showing integrity, compassion, resolve. Those stone replicas of the leaflets outside the university now, a constant reminder.
Her words, her choices, her sacrifice, they endure. Her spirit continues, doesn't it? In anyone who stands for truth.
It really was extraordinary courage, born from conviction, not from hate or violence, just this deep integrity.
Shining against that immense pressure to conform, choosing to speak when millions were silent.
And it came from love, didn't it? Love for humanity, respect for truth, for conscience.
Her story makes you ask uncomfortable questions, though, about yourself. What would you risk? For what you believe?
It does. It reminds you that heroism often isn't loud or flashy. It starts with quiet, private decisions. The importance of thinking critically, speaking out.
She knew the regime's power. She wasn't naive. She made a conscious choice.
And her ultimate achievement, perhaps, was affirming human dignity, human courage, even under the most brutal conditions.
Her life isn't some easy myth. It forces you to confront oppression and our own potential roles in it.
She's a symbol of active moral engagement, not just someone to remember passively. Her voice challenges us, especially when we face choices between what's easy and what's right.
The White Rose, such a small group, but their impact, immense.
It speaks to that quiet, steadfast kind of courage.
And those final words, the sun still shines. That message of hope, even then, it stays with you.
Her light definitely endures.
So Sophie Scholl's brief life, that unwavering commitment to conscience against overwhelming odds, it leaves such a deep impression.
And her story feels incredibly relevant today, doesn't it? Regardless of our own circumstances.
It really pushes you to think about your own capacity for courage. What do you truly stand for? What risks are you willing to take for those beliefs?
It's a powerful reminder, ultimately, of individual action against injustice and why it's so important to hold on to hope, even when times feel incredibly dark.